Okay, so it is Thursday, September 30th, 2021. It's about 1:18 p.m. It's about 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Right now I am at Cahokia Mounds. It's a National Historic Landmark, and this is really the first city in America. This was before Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. It's before St. Augustine, Florida, or Jamestown, Virginia, or Plymouth, Massachusetts, or any other city you want to name. It was inhabited in the 600s and 700s, really, by a tribe, and the apex of this city was roughly between 950 and 1250. Mississippian culture started to be seen more around 900, and then by the 1300s, that's when it was mostly abandoned. So you see these mounds all around here. And over here is Monk's Mound. That was named after some French Trappist monks who moved into this area in the early 1800s, and it got named after them, even though they didn't have anything to do with it. So I'm going to be walking over there. Now, Woodhenge, those were some poles they had in the ground, kind of as a calendar. As you can see from this sign, that is a mile down that way. So that's where that is. So I'm going to be walking over here to Monk's Mound. I'll start there. So I'm going to cut till I get a little bit closer. Okay, so I'll show you this sign here for Monk's Mound. This is the largest archaeological site in the country, and this mound is really the largest mound that was built in the entire continent of North America. We're about roughly, probably less than 10 miles away from the arch, just to give you an idea. Okay. So that sign I just showed you, that's right there. And be walking up this way. There's stairs over here where you can get up it. And you see all these mounds across the way there. This was, they say, this whole city was 4,000 acres. They now have 2,200 acres preserved, of which about 800 are accessible to the public. And there was originally about 120 mounds, and they have identified about 80 of them. They're all numbered. Monk's Mound here is Mound 38. Okay. Interpretive Center and museum, that's down over there on the other side. They have a tour at 2 o'clock. So the 10 and 2, typically 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So we'll see about that. I decided to start here. So I'm jogging up these steps. It always seems like I'm going slower than I am. You can see the arch way down there. If you can see it on here, I hope so. Yeah, it's kind of right down there. You can see some buildings downtown. At least I can. Here it is looking down the side here. That's the Interpretive Center and Museum down there. And I can see the Stan Musial Bridge way down there as well. Well, we'll go over here. Let's see what we can see from over here. I'm gonna make a quick cut here. Okay, so we'll head back on down. So this is Monk's Mound. So it's a pretty spectacular sight. there's another grouping of steps up here. Maybe I'll try to get in there by 2 p.m. See what they have to say about some of this stuff. Okay, so we just about made it down. I'm going to cut here. Okay, so we're here at the Interpretive Center here. Now, this city was larger than London at the time. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. Okay. There's another sign over here. Road to America's oldest city.
Yeah, someday we think it was summertime, yes.
Walking where a neighborhood once stood. Okay. So it's a World Heritage Site, of course. And there's going to be a lot of artifacts in here. Now I should mention we're actually in Collinsville, Illinois. Cahokians moved into the area later on. It was named after them. So I'll just give you a flavor of this museum, obviously.
Along one of the east-west alignments of Collinsville, what we call Woodhenge. Woodhenge is set about 4 feet over the region of
Spring equinox. Here's the fall equinox. Summer solstice.
European explorers Europeans left behind no written language to help us better understand their culture and beliefs. No one knew the Woodhenge system until the early 1960s, when archaeological excavation was done on the earth's construction.
Let's try this. Spring. Summer. There's fall. And winter.
So I did see a shovel down there.
I think that was where they were digging, the archaeologists. Yeah.
Oh, but it was made out of wood.
Yeah. Oh, it was? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And there's corn. You see how tiny it was? It's almost like
very necessary for breaking the sod and cultivating the crops. Important to their survival was the agriculture. Great lengths to be able to raw materials.
And this is the tools section.
Valley. So it was something that reflects Mississippian society. To flint knife and mill creek and pole blade, I would start with by selecting a couple of different plants. Look for pieces already flat, tattered, shaped, already. Manufacturing station tile on start line, go around and chip off the edges, expose it.
Okay, so as you can see, there's stuff everywhere, as you would imagine. Here's where the archaeologists were discovering this.
Start in 10 minutes. This will be a walking tour. The round lasts about 1 hour. If you're interested in going on this tour, please meet the tour guide and the site model in the gift shop. Thank you.
So this is a pretty amazing reconstruction of this stuff. Brings it to life, that's for sure. Okay. Here's the other side of that Birdman tablet. Here's the gift shop. That's Monk's Mound there.
Down to the Gulf of Mexico, Smoky Mountains area, all the way over in the Kansas area as well. So they're traveling a lot. And while they're traveling, the main thing they were trading would have been excess amounts of food. They traded out a lot of food and they brought in elite goods as well. I'll talk about the elite goods later, but that's something that we find that's interesting here. They really don't trade out anything except excess food and religion. Any questions so far?
Was their religion?
Yeah, so we're not exactly sure what their religion was. We call it the Mississippian Religion. We trace it through living Native American tribes today. So the Osage people have a lot of similarities to artwork we find here. So we actually pretty much solely use the Osage people. If you guys go inside and this is our Palisade Wall. We have several reconstructions here at this site. This is one of them. While you guys are walking past this post, you'll get a chance to see what archaeologists look at every single day. So this wall deteriorated several times throughout the history, and they had to rebuild it. Each time they rebuilt it, they built it over the same general area, but they changed the plan of it to a degree. So that's what you guys will see here. When archaeologists excavated this area, they didn't find much in the way of the actual wall. What they saw was staining in the soil from where the wood deteriorated, and then just a few select pieces of the wood here and there. So that goes along. We actually don't know how tall the wall would have been or how it would have been constructed. We've had to use some corollary advice to say. One technique for ancient constructions throughout the world is that for every foot in the ground you dig, you can build a wooden construction 3 to 5 feet up. So we find that the trench was dug 5 feet deep all the way across. So we estimate that they could have built the wall 15 to 20 feet tall and still had it stable. They could have gone less, they could have gone more, but that just wouldn't have been as efficient of their usage. We also don't know how the wall actually would have looked. As I said, most of it was deteriorated. We've had to go look at different Native American sites that were existing at the time of the Cahokians and compare. They found the highest level of technology that would have been available to them at the time here. So you guys can actually, if you go over to Monk's Mound, you will see a recreation of the wall there with the clay daub. So you can see the two different levels of technology available to them. We don't know why the wall was actually built. Some people like to say it was built for defensive nature. But a lot of archaeologists don't believe that for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, the Cahokians were so much larger than any other contemporary nation at the time in this area. The closest nation of comparable size would be the Mayan people. They collapsed right around 1000 AD, and they're 1,000 miles away downstream. Doesn't really make sense that they're getting up here since the Cahokian people start right around 1000 AD. There's a little bit of evidence that the Mayan people travel up here and bring some technology, but we don't think they're getting this far for any type of warfare. Also, the wall is never damaged besides natural means. We find no area where it's burned down or destroyed. We don't find any cemeteries here with warlike wounds. We also find no overproduction of war weaponry. So we don't think these were ever built for defensive means. Rather, we think they built this halfway through the history of the Cahokian people because they develop a hierarchy. First 150 years here, they're fairly egalitarian. We actually think they're somewhat matriarchal, where the women are in charge of the religion and the agriculture, and then the men are in charge of the hunting and the construction. We think after the 150 years, the population here gets so dense, they get so many different elite goods that they develop, for maybe the first time in North America, a hierarchy. They build this wall throughout the 2-mile Grand Plaza. All the elite people move to the inside. They live on top or surrounding a lot of the mounds. And then all the working class people live outside of the mound in just small little communities spread all throughout this 6-square-mile complex. So that's likely why this wall is built, but we won't know for sure probably ever. Any questions over all of that? Alrighty, we can get moving. LiDAR view of these two mounds. So these two mounds haven't been touched by archaeologists, so this is what they would have looked like 800 years ago when the people left. So this is a real good way to see that these mounds were man-made, because nature doesn't make anything that is that concentric.
Cool. What do you use a LiDAR?
So those are the twin mounds. At any other Native American site at the time that you'll go and visit, there's a lot of different mound sites all throughout North America. Any mound you see there is going to be at the largest, the size of these here. They're not even half the size of Monk's Mound. That goes to show you that they are well and away larger than anyone else living in this area. So there are 3 different types of mounds existing here at Cahokia. The first type of mound, the most common type of mound all throughout North America, is this conical mound that you see right over there. They are not unique to the Cahokian people. They are a Native American phenomenon. They've existed 8,000 years ago that we've found. They go all throughout North America. Anytime we find them, they are almost always going to be burial mounds. So anytime a conical mound, a circular mound is discovered, usually burial mounds. So much so, in fact, that when we discover new ones nowadays, we don't dig into them. We go, that is a burial mound, we leave it alone. They might do things like LiDAR, ground penetrating radar, or magnetometry. Those are non-invasive techniques that lets us see what's in there. But any place we know or suspect Native American remains are there, we don't dig at all. So anytime you guys see a circular mound, burial mound. Just because they're burial mound doesn't mean they're all the same though. They have all different types of forms and reasoning why they were built. Some of them only have a few burials in them, 1 or 2 elite people. Some of them, like the burial mounds down there, have 800 burials in them. I know that doesn't look conical, that's because there's 3 mounds over there covered. But those are burial mounds, trust me, we'll get to that in a minute. But the shape and size changes as well. Sometimes there's a burial in the ground and they build a conical mound on top of it. Sometimes they just build the mound and they put the burial inside the mound itself. Sometimes they build one small burial mound, leave it, a few generations someone else will come and build on top of it and put another burial mound. So there's just a whole wide variety going on with those, but those are burial mounds. Second, yes, do you have a question?
Have the mounds settled?
Yes, they have. To a degree, Monk's Mound has had the most settling here. It is the largest by far. It is also the first one they built, so their techniques weren't there. So that's had a lot of what we call slumping, where sides of it has fallen off. Monk's Mound, the Twin Mounds have not settled too much. They think they may have lost about a foot off of the top of them. And then the sides may have lost a little bit of their shape, but to a degree, they're pretty much the shape they would have been. Yeah.
How tall is the mound?
Monk's Mound is 100 feet tall. I'm not sure how tall these are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. So second type of mound, the most common here at Cahokia are the platform mounds. That's what you guys will see right behind you over there. Those mounds are always going to have structures on top of them. So we think throughout the entire history, just because irrigation is going to be a lot better on top of those mounds, things are going to store longer. But the mound behind you in particular was used as a charnel house. So that's what is similar to a morgue. They prepared the bodies of the elite up there for the afterlife. We're not sure what they were doing to prepare them, but they were preparing them in some way up there. And then they actually carried them over to the conical mound and buried them over there. And there actually at one point was a raised platform connecting these 2 mounds for them to carry the deceased on. But that's where the Boy Scout Camp Road actually ran through. As we walk, you'll see that the trees all line up. That's where the road went through. Yeah. And they plowed right through the platform.
Did they bury them in the side or on the top?
Kind of in the center. And then they would build the mound on top of the burials usually. So it would usually be underneath it or in the center of the mounds. But that being said, we do have a lot of situations where later tribes will come here, even at Cahokia in like the 15th and 16th century. Other tribes came through here and they knew that these conical mounds were burial mounds, and they actually buried some people up there who were not related to Cahokia at all. So you see that at a lot of different sites. It would be a 2,000-year-old burial, and then there's like a 500-year-old burial from a completely different people. And that might be just put in the side.
So what was the people here later?
All different types. Actually in the 16th century is when we get the actual Cahokian people. So we don't know what the people here called themselves. Left no written language. What happened was when first European contact came here, there was a tribe of Illini speaking people, and they were called the Cahokians. And that's just where we get the name for this area from. The actual Cahokian tribe had nothing to do with this place. They did not build this mounds at all. That's just where the name comes from. There's actually a city about 20 miles over there called Cahokia. That's where they relocated to. So yeah, there's a living people today called the Cahokians. Did not build these mounds at all. Yeah, a little bit confusing. Same thing with Monks Mound. There were no Christian monks living here 1,000 years ago. In the 17th century, Napoleon Bonaparte came to power, kicked out a lot of different religious groups. One of them were French Trappist monks. They went all throughout Europe, actually. No one would let them settle down. They eventually came to Americas, traveled all about, eventually settled here in the middle of America. And I'll show you guys the mound. They put their monastery on a separate platform mound, then they farmed on top of Monks Mound. And then when European settlers came here, they just were like, oh, that's the mound the monks use. That's the mound, blah, 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 Monks Mound, and the name has stuck since then. So that's where we get a lot of the different terms from this place. Yep, so those are the platform mounds. Anything they wanted to elevate above the daily life, they use those. Finally, the rarest type of mounds we have here are the Ridgetop Mounds. You see one over there. We have about 6 of them here at the site. So there are 4 Ridgetop Mounds, one at each cardinal direction, and then everything is built within those mounds. So we actually think they built those very early on. They all correlate together. And then at the very center point of all of Cahokia, there is another Ridgetop Mound. So we have 4 Ridgetop Mounds, cardinal direction, then we have one at the center point. The final Ridgetop Mound we have here is that one way down there. That is Mound 72. If you remember, I just said a little bit earlier, 3 smaller burial mounds that are then covered by a Ridgetop Mound. Over 800 burials over there. The first burial started at the beginning of the Cahokian history, right around 1000 AD, then it went all the way for 120 years. So we actually think that there is some discontinuation between the burials there, because we get the highest level of burials we see in Cahokian history and the lowest degree of burials there. So we actually think there are 2 or 3 separate groups of people using this burial site at different time periods. There's so much going on down there, in fact, that during normal years I will have a whole separate tour for that area. So I'll go over it real briefly, and then if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, but we'll just go over it quick. The most elite burial we have down there is called the Beaded Burial. It is a man and a woman, and they are about 25 to 30 years old, and they are actually buried on top of 20,000 marine shell beads that came from the Gulf of Mexico up here. And then those beads are splayed in the shape of a bird or an eagle. And the Cahokian people believe that the bird was related to the upper world, the place of the gods, where we think that they're trying to show that the man or the woman was in some way related to the gods, was a demigod or a god themselves. Not only do they have the 20,000 marine shell beads shaped in a bird, they were buried with a copper scepter. The copper came from the Great Lakes area, was brought and worked here. They had 2 full bushel loads of mica, which is a semi-precious crystal that came from the Smoky Mountains area. They had 451 ritually produced arrowheads. You can see the actual arrowheads inside. They are very finely made. A lot of artistic detail went into it, so much so in fact that if you used it, it would break on impact, so we know they were made just for this burial. Not just the arrowheads, there would have been a full shaft and quiver likely, it's just deteriorated since then. And then they had 12 chunky stones, which is a very important game here as well. So they had an extremely vast degree of wealth there. We don't find really anything else comparing to that level of wealth here at Cahokia. But besides that, in some other burials, not that burial pit, but next to it, there are about 30 to 40 men who have all had their heads bashed in and they were tossed into the pit. Some of them still alive because we have found some skeletons where the fingers are still gripping at the dirt. There are also several pits where there are women. There's one pit with 12 women, another of 25, and then another of I think around 30. The women are all aged between 12 and 25, and they've all been buried there as well. So there's arguments whether these are sacrificial or ritual burials. Obviously, the men who got hit in the back of the head and tossed in were low class. They were not treated well. But we're not sure what's going on with the women there. We used to think that it would have been something related to sacrifice, but now that we think this place was more matriarchal in the beginning, what some people believe is that the women there died in childbirth and they're being treated the same way men who die in battle are. That's something you see with some Mesoamerican cultures. When a woman dies in childbirth, she will go to the same place a man dies in battle. So we think that might be going on down there. But you talk to 3 different archaeologists here, you're going to get 5 different opinions on what's going on. You talk to 3 archaeologists about what's going on in Mound 72, you're going to get 10 different opinions. They can't decide what they think what's going on down there. In 2018, they went and re-looked at the remains there, and what they actually figured was everything was wrong. If you guys came here in 2015, I would have told you that the 2 people buried there were 2 men in their 40s. When they re-looked at it, it was realized there was a man and a female in their 20s. They have to re-look at all the burial arrangements. So there's a lot of confusion what's going on down there. It was excavated in the 1960s, and we're not allowed to re-excavate it, so we just have the information from back then.
Did you guys go over all the property here?
Did we do what?
Did you guys go over all the property here looking for?
Yes, so they've, all the 6 square miles have been walked by like foot. They've done things, non-invasive techniques, so the ground penetrating LiDAR and the magnetometry, but only 1% of the site has actually been excavated. But it's still the largest archaeological site all throughout Illinois. It's just so large. But in certain places we don't excavate at all. So in the 1990s, NAGPRA came into place, Native Americans Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Means a lot of different things. If we so much as suspect burial remains in the area, we don't dig there. So Mound 72, we don't dig at all. Any of these conical mounds, we don't dig at all. Any place, like if we find a little pinky bone, that whole area is quadrant off. So we're pretty careful where we dig nowadays. Most years we'll have a field school going on. This year we don't. We do have one archaeologist. He's out here. He's working on just a paper. He's excavating a copper workshop over there. Oh yeah, we have a lot of deer. There's one trash pit where they found 3,000 deer skeleton alone.
Wow, 3,000?
3,000. Yeah, deer are the most abundant source of animal protein food that we find here. The largest we find is elk. We don't find a whole lot of it, and there's no bison ever found in this area. We know they were roaming throughout. We never find any remains of them here. So yeah, these are the 3 types of mounds we have here. Behind me, it's kind of hard to see. That is the largest borrow pit on the site. It's 17 acres and 12 feet deep. That's where they got a lot of the clays and the soils for like these twin mounds here and such. All right, do you guys have any questions? All right, we can get moving around at one time. That's where they built their monastery, and then they farmed over there. But interestingly enough, when Lewis and Clark came through here on their return journey, they stopped over in St. Louis. They had Sacagawea with them, and she had John Baptiste at the time, otherwise known as Pomp. They were looking to get him baptized, but no one over in St. Louis was able to baptize him, so they actually brought John Baptiste over here to the head monk up there and had him baptize him. So we know for sure Sacagawea and John Baptiste were over here. Wow. Likely Lewis and Clark themselves also came right up there to that mound. So this area has seen a lot of history throughout the days. And then you'll see all throughout this area, it's extremely flat. We're standing in natural floodplains, so normally you get swales and ridges throughout here, and there were. Before the Cahokians, there were about 6 foot tall hills going all throughout here. While the Cahokians built these mounds, they actually terraformed the land. They cut the top 3 feet of those hills off and dropped them in the bottom 3 feet, made this whole 2 square mile area flat. Then they brought in some of that sandy, silty, loamy soil, put about 3 inches of it all throughout this area, so it made it nice to walk on and added an extra layer of irrigation. So we know they did that through this entire Grand Plaza area. we have evidence of them doing at other sites as well. So they were not just constructing 120 mounds, they were terraforming the entire land as they went. And keep in mind, they had no pack animals, they didn't have the wheel. Everything done here was done by brute force. We think they would have just dug up dirt and clays and soils using stone tools, maybe a few shell tools, filled up baskets that could carry about 50 to 60 pounds. Off they go to the top of the mound to dump it, and they go back down to fill it back up. We think that they would have had professional mound builders. Your entire life is going to be dedicated to building these mounds. Some mounds may have taken a long time. Monk's Mound may have taken 120 years. So you may be building a mound, your grandpa may be building the mound, his father may be building the same exact mound. So you may have a whole lineage of mound builders working on one single mound. Also, we don't know how the mounds would have looked at the time of the Cahokians. Likely they would have had all different degrees of style. Some of them may have been just let to grow wild. They'd be prairie growing throughout of it. We know some, like Twin Mounds and Monk's Mound, likely would have been kept clear of all weeds and had a ceremonial clay capping on top of it. The Twin Mounds likely had an all black clay covering over it. Monk's Mound likely had an all orange cover capping of it. And then you just have people keeping that clear year round. Some of the mounds we believe actually may have grown wild, and then they burned them in a prescribed fire in some type of ritual. Because that would be northeast, like to the side. Okay. Part of Cahokia right now, this is pretty much the center of the Grand Plaza. That mound right up there, right in front of the street, between this tree and that post, is the center point of all of Cahokia. That's the Ridgetop Mound I was talking about. That's what is the dead heart of Cahokia. Real quick, we'll talk about Woodhenge. That is the solar calendar that the Cahokian people here used. They used it for several different reasons. Don't ask me to explain how. It's above my pay grade. But they used the Woodhenge to find out the actual cardinal directions. They're able to, on the equinox, with the length of the shadow, do some math. Tells you cardinal directions. I don't understand it. They did, apparently. They were able to find the cardinal directions. They are also able, from that, to align a lot of the different mounds here. So Mound 72 is actually on not only the center point of Cahokia, but is actually runs along the lunar maximum and minimum on the equinox, I believe. So when you put the center point of Cahokia along the lunar maximum minimum, you find Mound 72. They got that from Woodhenge. I'm sure they did other alignments here as well that we just don't figure out. But Woodhenge was very important to them. It marked out different days of the years. We know it marked out the solstices and the equinoxes. When they first built it, they built it with 24 posts. Then they rebuilt it with 36, then 48, then 60, and then finally with 72 posts. So they kept building it bigger and bigger, each time in increments of 12. We're not sure why. But we think there would have been some significance to this 12. But we think they were building it larger and larger because they're getting a more complex religious system here. They're adding more holidays to their calendar. They need more posts to mark those calendar dates out. We're not sure what those days were, but we know they would have celebrated the equinoxes and the solstices. Both of those days are very important, or all four of those days are very important to all cultures throughout history. We see that here as well. During the summer solstice, we think they would have had a very large ritual. So what would happen? You get, your 10 to 20,000 Cahokia people living here. Maybe people migrate from other areas. They go all gather at the Woodhenge. They stand at the center post and they look at the summer solstice post on the morning of the summer solstice. They will be facing towards Monk's Mound. What actually happens on the morning of the summer solstice, it appears as if Monk's Mound is giving birth to the sun. So what we think that they would do is you would have the chieftain or the shaman standing on top of Monk's Mound. They may have even had a cloak with that mica that was buried over there. That mica would catch the reflections of the sun and they would glow like the sun itself. And in the morning they'd be standing up there and they'd go something like, "Look at me on our holiest of holy days. I am giving bolt to our holiest of holy objects. Look how great I am." The sun would rise out of their house. Then you could have everyone come gather here at the center area. Researchers found that if you have someone standing on that second platform of Monk's Mound and project their voice out, the voice can be heard anywhere within this 2 square mile radius. Standing here, standing on top of the mounds there, way over there, standing behind the mounds where we were talking earlier, you could have heard the speaker up there. So you could have, 10,000 people gathered over there for a visual ritual, get everyone gathered here for an audio ritual. Then we think they'd have massive feasts and festivals. We have a trash pit that was used for about 2 to 3 week period. Within that trash pit, we find all types of berries and nuts. 2,000 individual deer skeleton are buried in that trash pit. And it takes more than 2,000 people to eat 2,000 deer. So they are feeding a massive amount of people there. We know this trash pit was used for a very short amount of time, because when researchers excavated it, first off, the trash smell hit them in the face from 800 years ago. They could still smell the refuse. The stuff was very well preserved. The berries, one researcher picked it up and squished it, and blackberry and juice came out of it from 800 years ago. They also found fly larvae in the trash there. So they know that the trash pit was open long enough that flies could go lay their larvae, but not long enough for the larvae to hatch. So they would have used it, we think, for just a few weeks long, maybe for some type of festival. Then they closed it back up. Not only was 2,000 to 3,000 deer skeleton, the berries, all the different types of nuts, they found swan skeletons there, but not the wings. They think they saved the wings for some type of event. They even found a necklace with a alligator tooth on it and a shark tooth on it separately. So they actually think those were just brought by pilgrims coming here for the feast, and then their pendant broke and they just tossed it in the trash pit. So that lets us know people were coming from far afield to Cahokia for large ritual gatherings. It went right behind Monk's Mound. So the chieftain living on top of Monk's Mound could have seen all the visitors coming in from right there. Yep. So we'll try to wrap everything up here. So this symbol right here is a symbol we find here at Cahokia. You will also find this exact same symbol all throughout the Osage artworks. That happens all the time. So that's one of the symbols we find that we know this place is related. But besides that, this is where we were just standing. That mound is the one right over there. This is a chunky court. I promise to talk about chunky later. Now is the time. Chunky is an incredibly important game to the Cahokian people. We find chunky stones all throughout the place. There are 12 of them buried with that elite burial. They're buried with a lot of the other elite people here. Basically, it was a game between two competitors. The ref or the official would roll a chunky stone, which is just a granite stone that has a concave center. They roll that on the ground, and then the competitors will throw spears. Whoever hits it or lands closest is the winner. So that was what we see right here. It was played all throughout the place. We think it was an incredibly important game to them. It may have had some ritual significance to them. Some people have drawn correlations between the rolling stone and the sun. But we know it was incredibly important, not just for the pure number of chunky stones we find here, but because of the fact we have chunky statues. Throughout ancient cultures, most societies will make statues for just the important reasons. Normally, you get statues made asking for good agriculture, good health, good fertility. Here we get the same thing. We get statues asking for good agriculture, good health, good fertility, and good chunky games. So chunky was right up there with the most important aspects of life. We got a chunky statue right there. He's chunky stone there, and the other side he has a bundle of spears. So chunky was incredibly important to them. We think they would have had professional chunky players. And we know that it was still played by descendant tribes today. Also, This statue itself is very cool for the fact it is made out of Missouri red flint clay. That is native to about 20 miles over there across the river. It's only found there all throughout North America. So anytime we find a statue that is made with this material, we know it came from Cahokia, and we find these statues all throughout the Midwest and Southeast. Pretty much in an 800-mile radius from Cahokia, we will find these statues. Anytime we find them, we know they came from Cahokia. Personally, I was down in Cherokee, North Carolina. They have a very good museum there. And I saw one of these statues there, and I asked about it, and it is Missouri red flint clay. So we know that at some point, people in Cherokee, North Carolina were trading with Cahokia. Now, was it at the time the Cahokians were alive? Maybe it was just carried throughout the generations and it ended up there, but we know that there was some line of continuation between the two places. We find that all throughout the place. So that's just something that's fun for archaeologists to find. It helps us connect different tribes and groups of places. The other type of artifacts we find from Cahokia are big, large pottery vessels. We find big, large pottery vessels made here at Cahokia all throughout the area. They weren't trading the big pottery vessels, they were trading what was in it. They were just trading the surplus food. So that's also how we know that they were trading large amounts of food from this place. We find large vessels traded from Cahokia to all these other villages.
Okay, so what he was saying is that's the last house on the property here. There was a huge subdivision in here, and there was a Boy Scout camp and a road that went through there. There was also a drive-in movie theater, and people used to drive to the top of Monk's Mound and watch the movies. So that's what he said. So I'm walking back over here. Okay, so I came down here to Mound 72. You see they've got these, there's walking trails to different mounds and that. And just wanted to come down here to this one. So that's where we're at down here. That's Mound 72 there. But you can look up more, read all about that one. So we'll head on back here. So these are these two twin mounds. Yeah, okay, so that's Mound 60, or Fox Mound it's called. And that's Mound 59, the conical one. Roundtop Mound, it's also called. Okay, I came down the road here to Woodhenge, so you're just getting the kind of the highlights of some of this, but there's lots of walking paths back there and more mounds, and there's information on all of them. You can read about all of them, what they were for and all that stuff. You see mounds all over the place, even around here. So here's Woodhenge, that's calendar they had, like a solar calendar. You see all these poles around here. Okay, I guess I'm going to wrap this tour up. This was very brief. This is only the highlights, but there is a lot more to explore. Like I said, a lot more mounds you can look at. And there's a lot of walking paths down there in that main part. So, okay, thanks again for watching.